Hey everybody, welcome back to Decode Tech. Last video we talked about what programming is and how it works and what we need to get started programming. And this video we're going to look at how to install Python and how to start using it to make our own programs. And we're going to figure out how to configure it to work for our computer. Today's video is about installing Python on the Windows operating system, but I'm going to also have one for Mac OS as well. So stay tuned for that one if you're on Mac. We're going to cover most of the fundamentals of programming in this series, and then maybe later we'll move on to some more intermediate to advanced series, but we'll cover mainly just the basics in this one. So if you're ready, let's get into it. Alright, so we're here on the desktop and we're going to install Python Interpreter. So to do that we need to go to a web browser. I'm using Google Chrome, you can use whatever you want. And we're going to go to python.org. Now it doesn't matter about the wwws anymore in front of a web address, so you can just type in Python, and my computer already recognizes it, .org, and hit enter. Now we're going to go under downloads. There's two versions of Python actually. There's Python 2 and Python 3. Python 2 is being discontinued and Python 3 is the new standard, but there is still a lot of code written in Python 2 that hasn't been updated yet. Most big companies are working on that, but Python 3 is the future and everything's moving over to that pretty much. So I recommend installing Python 3. Now notice that Python 3.5 cannot be used on Windows XP or earlier, so if you're running a machine like that, just note you have to install an earlier version. So I'm going to go ahead and click the Python 3 download for Windows, and it'll start the download. After it's done, it might pop up a window asking what you want to do with the installer, or you might have to go and click on it like I do down in the bottom left hand corner. Now you can do a custom install or a regular install. I would say just go ahead and hit the install now. And now it says, do you want this app to make a change to your device? And you do, so go ahead and click yes. Now I might speed up the install process here so you don't have to sit and wait for it to install. So we're at the end and it said setup was successful, and so you can just hit close. Now there's some things you want to make sure are set up right before you try to run any Python programs, and that is something called your environment variable. So first of all, we're going to open up our command prompt, which I have pinned down here. You can instead go to the search and type in CMD or command prompt, and it'll come up like this, and then you can just click on it and launch it. So once you're in command prompt, you want to type in Python. And if this is Python is not a recognized internal or external command, that means Python is not set in your environment variables, either in your system or your user environment variables. Sometimes Python installs will give you a little checkbox to install while you're installing it that says set Python in my path. And if you check that, you don't have to do this. But if there's no option and it doesn't put it in the path for you, if it doesn't recognize it right away from the command prompt, you'll probably want to set it yourself. So to do that, go under the search bar, type in environment variable, and now you'll see edit the system environment variables. Click on that, and then down here you want to click on the environment variables button. Now you can either edit the system variable path or the variable path for just the users. So I'm going to do it for just the users, and I'm going to hit edit. Now the path is where your Python interpreter lives. Now Python 2 is going to live under local disk C, and it'll be right there, Python 2.7. But for Python 3, you have to go into users, the username, Decode Tech, and then by default, you're not going to see it, but there's an app data folder. So what you're going to have to do, if you haven't done it already, is go under View, and then over here on the right, go and check the Hidden Items box. This will now reveal this app data folder. You want to click into that. You want to go into Local Programs Python, and then Python 3.7. Now this is the folder where your Python interpreter lives. Another useful thing to do is go under View and hit File Name Extensions, and now you'll see which are just text files ending in .txt or executable file ending in .exe. So the Python.exe is what you need to be in your system path. So now we're going to go up to the top, address bar, click in it, and you're going to copy this path with either right-clicking and hitting copy or Control-C. And then we're going to go back to our environment variables, and we're just going to paste it. We're going to hit New, and we're going to paste that in here. And we're going to hit OK, and hit OK again, and OK again, and go back to the command prompt. Now if you type in Python, you should get a little prompt. This is the interactive Python interpreter where you can just type in commands and kind of play around. It's kind of like a little playground. And so here we see Python 3.7.3. That means we successfully added it onto the system path, or onto the username path in this case. And basically what that means is the computer will know what Python is from any directory you're using in your username. So that way you can launch Python from wherever, and it's very useful. All right, now, how do we write a Python script? Well, remember, programming is just text. So we can use just a plain text editor like Notepad. So let's go into our Documents folder. Let's go back to our username. Go under Documents. Let's make a new folder. You don't have to if you don't want to, but I'm going to make a new folder and I'm going to call it Python Tutorials. And I'm going to go into that folder, and now I'm going to create a new text file with Notepad. So find Notepad on your computer, launch it, and now I'm just going to show you a line of code, and I'm not going to explain it for now, but it's going to output any phrase we give to it. So we're going to type in print, open parentheses, quotation marks, and what is often the standard for your first Python program is a phrase called hello world. So I'm just going to type hello world, close parentheses. Now that's all the code we need for the computer to display the phrase hello world. So I'm going to hit File, Save As. If you're not already in your Documents file or folder, then navigate there and then go under the folder you want to save it. So I want to save it under Python Tutorials, and then I'm going to name it Hello World. And now the next part is very important. Instead of .txt for just a plain text file, we're going to name it .py. That lets it know that it's a Python file. And then I'm going to hit Save. Now I'm going to exit out of my text editor, and I'm going to go back to the command prompt. And now we need to be in the directory. Here we're under C, Users Decode Tech. We need to be under the directory that our file is in. So we're under C, Users, Decode Tech, Documents, and Python Tutorials. If you don't know what the path is, I have a Windows Basics series, and I explain what the path is. So if you could go check that out, if you don't understand what I'm talking about, that would be great. But if you're still with me, let's go ahead and so you can copy your path in the address bar, then go to your command prompt, and you can CD space and paste your address and hit enter. Now that we're in the directory that our Python file is stored, we can now call Python, which in effect calls the Python interpreter, space, and then pass the name of your file you just created, which we named hello world.py. Now this will take that hello world file and run it through the Python interpreter, and we should see our output in the terminal. So I'm going to hit enter, and if you see the text hello world displayed to the screen and a new prompt, you've successfully coded your first program, which printed the text hello world to the terminal. Now I know most people, when they think of a computer program, they think of nice graphical user interface with buttons and all these fancy features that we have nowadays, but really the core concepts need to be learned in just the terminal before we move on to GUI programming, which is a whole different experience. So we're going to learn the fundamentals without GUIs, and then we'll get into GUIs a little later on. And this is what caused me a lot of confusion when learning, is I was like, well, what are we doing? You know, I'm used to buttons and text fields and different kind of selector drop downs and stuff, and I'm like, what even is this hello world do for us? But we're going to show that these basic principles can be built on, and we can program some pretty complex stuff. So that was our first program. Now, you'll never pretty much program in Notepad. That's not convenient at all. We're going to want another editor, but I wanted to prove that it's just really any text editor will work, because code is just text. So Python comes with a built-in text editor. So if you go down to your search and type idle, IDLE, I have Python 2 and 3 installed, and so I want to make sure I get the one that says Python 3.7, but you'll probably just have one idle, so just click on idle, and after it loads, here I see Python 3.7, and from here, this is an interactive shell where we can just type commands like the one we just did, print hello world. After we hit enter, it'll just run the code right away. This is a really good way to learn, and it's an interactive way, so it's really more of a playground feel. It's not how you actually write a real program. But if you go under File and hit New File, it'll open an actual text editor like Notepad, except for more fancy. And if we type in the code now, you'll see some fancy highlighting. So this is a special code editor that highlights key things that we need to note, and it really helps us keep track of what our code is doing and making sure we're spelling things right and not making little errors. So this is how we'll write code from now on, and then you can save it. The default directory it saves to, I believe, is your scripts folder in Python. Okay, it's just in Python, and then you can click into scripts, or you can go off into any other folder you created. I'm going to go into my documents and go under my Python tutorials, and I'm just going to click that same file and hit save, and it's going to overwrite it. That's fine because it's the exact same code. Now to run it, instead of going to the terminal and typing in Python, you can just run and then run module, and then it'll run it in its own little terminal window in the shell. So that's another way and a more practical way to write a lot of stuff, but you can do it in the terminal just as well. And the terminal is going to be, or command prompt is going to be useful for many other programming tools and stuff that we use. So it's pretty good practice to get used to the feel of using a command prompt anyway. So there we did it. We got Python installed and set up to run on Windows, and we ran our first program. And later, I'll explain exactly what all this is doing and why it works like it does. So that's it for today's tutorial. We set up Python and got it running, and next video we'll talk more about how this actually worked, and we'll get into it a little bit deeper. And each video will keep building on these basic concepts. And the encouraging thing is once you get one language, you can apply these basics to almost all the other programming languages. So then it saves you a lot of time later when you learn other programming languages. If you found it informative, you can support the channel by subscribing if you're not already. Please leave a comment down below if you have any questions or can't figure something out, and I'll definitely try to help you out. Please share the video with anybody that might find this type of thing interesting. Drop a like as well. And we'll catch you all in the next video. We're going to